This is Catherine Schneider from the Fitchburg Historical Society, and we are continuing our series of visiting with people from the Fitchburg community, business, education, government, and finding out how COVID has really impacted their what they're doing in Fitchburg and the Fitchburg community. And so this afternoon, we are so pleased to welcome Pam Birschbach from First Weber Realty. So I'm just going to ask Pam, first of all, if she could do a little introduction of herself and tell us a little bit about her background in real estate, and then what her professional experience has been like, maybe particularly in Fitchburg.
I'd love to. So I've been in real estate since January of '99, always with First Weber. And our office wasn't always in Fitchburg. We didn't move to our present office, until I believe it was 2003. And otherwise, we were in Whitney Way area and then moved out here. And I started managing our First Weber offices. I managed 4 of them in 2018. And so I sold real estate for 22 years. My now 23-year-old son was 6 months old. And so kind of worked through that career with young children and raised them along with learning about real estate. So it was very good.
Great, great. And then Pam, we've been dealing with COVID now for about a year and a half. This is September of 2021, and really began to really explode in the United States, maybe March of 2020. So in that time frame, could you give us just a sense maybe of the real estate market's movement?
Sure. So I think with COVID, one of the beauties of COVID is we all learned how important our personal spaces are and what we need to feel secure. And so, which was really has to do with housing, whether you're an apartment dweller or you own your own home or you rent a home, whatever it is. But we realized, okay, if I'm going to work from home, is it just me working from home? Is it me and my husband working from home? And if you have children, are they at home? Well, everybody was at home. And if you don't have the spaces in your home to make that work for everybody to be on their computer at the same time and not hear one another, then everybody started realizing, okay, my space isn't working. So how am I going to make my space work? And so what we found is we had a slight slowdown early on when COVID first hit, and we were like, well, what do we do with this? And there was just a slight bump in the road, I would say. But we realized our buyers, our clients were still saying to us, this isn't going to work for me. I got to get a bigger home because we're all at home and I don't see my kids going back to school for a while. Or maybe they don't have good internet, because not every place in Dane County has good internet. And you need good internet to work from home or have a school system at home. So we were consistently busy all the way through. And we probably had about a week where the WRA, the Wisconsin Realtors Association, and most of us as real estate firms were trying to figure out, how are we going to do this? How are we going to do showings? How are we going to do this effectively and safely for all parties? And it took us probably a week, and we figured it out that we all must wear masks. Everybody that's in a home must have a mask on, gloves on, booties, and lights were all left on in the homes. So they were there when we got there for showings. We left them on when we left. Nothing was touched. Only the real estate agents with their gloves on would open up doors or cupboards or anything along those lines. The buyers could not touch anything, and only one party at a time in a house. And so that worked fabulously. Now, there's certainly certain sellers and certain buyers that they just didn't want to go into a house, and they didn't even want to meet their realtor, and they certainly didn't want to meet a stranger. So what would happen is we, the agents, would go into the house and we'd video it and talk with them as we video. And that's how people bought homes. And so it was, which is just crazy to think about, of course, but we've done it before that way if we needed to. And a lot of people that were moving here were moving from out of state. They didn't have to work from home anymore. And so it was cheaper to move from California to Wisconsin. We had a huge surge from California coming here because they could work here and get paid for their job in California and sell their expensive home in California. So we had an awful lot of that going on. And then of course, what happened with apartment dwellers is, did they even feel safe in an apartment? Did they want to be in shared spaces, in common areas? They didn't want to touch the banisters. They didn't want to touch the elevator buttons. So it was a bit fearful for some people, and so I think that it took a little while for people to figure out, okay, if I'm not going to stay in my apartment, then I must find a home. And so we had a little bit more of a surge in July, August, September of 2020 because it was warm enough. We could be outside. We had it all figured out as far as for easy showings and how to handle the showings. And so we had a really strong surge. If you take a look at numbers from 2019 to 2020 for July, August, and September. And even now that we're in 2021 and we're comparing our numbers now from 2021 to 2020, those are hard months to beat because they were so strong. So that's when apartment dwellers said, I'm getting out of here, I'm finding a home. And so we had an awful lot of that. The other thing that we've seen an awful lot of is if it's people that have multiple homes. Maybe they have a home in Madison and they have a home in Tomahawk, and they don't need to show up to their job here in Madison any longer. So sell their house in Madison because we have higher taxes, and live in Tomahawk, and they can work there. So we're still seeing some of that a little bit. And I think we will for a little while because nobody really knows what's going to happen with their jobs yet. Will we have to show up to work, or will we be able to work from home, or will we have a hybrid? So that's kind of what we're seeing. Yeah, I think I covered that mostly. I'd have to say the question that most of our agents asked our clients, our buyers, is, do you feel safe in your environment? Safety was a really big deal. And does the layout actually work for you? And if it doesn't, where do you want to be? The other thing that came up quite a bit is outdoor spaces, because it was very nice to be able to sit outside and work, or be able to get your kids outside safely without having to go to a park. And so all of those, I think we took into consideration to help our buyers and our sellers figure out, okay, if you don't want to be in this space, where do you want to be and what's important? And to help them figure that out for themselves.
So you had not only looking at what people were doing, but also what they wanted, what their new life almost was like, checking in with them on that, because that drives how you want to live, which
Right.
is really, I guess my next question was just asking about what apartment renters and homeowners were looking for in terms of their living arrangements. And I know you've touched on that already, Pam. Anything else, like how spaces would be arranged? You mentioned the outdoor spaces, having more space for work and children doing their schooling at home. How does that make a difference in how you arrange for your home to look?
Well, one thing we found is it was always okay for, prior to COVID, to maybe double up on your workspace and your entertainment space. That was always all right because you didn't actually work there necessarily. So you would just clean up your workspace if you're going to entertain. And but now that wasn't so much the case. They weren't entertaining, but they needed this permanent workspace. And did they want their permanent workspace to be at the dining room table? Because that doesn't, it's just not a smart move to do that because you never walk away from work. And so it's always a reminder of, oh, I need to get this done. And so it just wasn't a good environment for people to live in. And we all saw a surge in desk selling and different types of furniture being sold to so that you'd have either a small desk, a large a desk, a more permanent workspace, or children having a small desk that they could work in their room, so that way children could still be in their room and sleep in their room, and parents could continue working and they weren't hearing each other speak. And so while they're all on their computers. Um, so that worked okay for a while, but what we found is most parents realized my children are never leaving their bedrooms. And that's just not a good idea. And so for those kids, and so they need to be able to walk out of their bedrooms, and they need to have a family environment that everybody can walk away from work and walk away from school and just be in a neutral space. So that's where we have found we've kind of gone that direction now, that when people are looking at homes, they want this neutral space, but then they also need their workspaces. And that's kind of the perfect spot if they can afford it and make it work. So we're seeing dining rooms not so important anymore. Big kitchens still very important. Um, the the family eating space is very important. The amount of bathrooms is very important. We're seeing an uptick in bathrooms. 2 is always great, 3 is better. Where it used to be, well, 1 is fine. We really were only home, between 5 and 9 p.m. and that we're using the bathrooms. And now, people are home all day and everybody's using the bathrooms. And so that's become a big important thing. Garage space, not so much. That's not as important as it used to be. But patios, porches, covered porches, screened in decks, play sets in the backyard, those are all very, very important again. They kind of lost their thrill. 2 years ago, a buyer would come to town and they'd say, I want to be able to walk to shopping stores and the grocery store. I don't want to drive. Well, that's kind of gone away. That's not important anymore. It's a matter of, okay, I don't mind driving. I kind of want to be further out in the country. I want my own space. I don't want my neighbors that close. So we're starting to see a different trend. And also because they didn't have to be in the city, because they didn't have to drive every day to work. What we did run into, we've ran into this for many years, but it's became more obvious in COVID, is you get outside of Fitchburg and even in parts of Fitchburg, we do not have proper internet. And that's not being fixed very quickly. And so you could be right outside of Verona and you don't have proper internet. 2 people can't be on a computer at once. You could be in a $700,000 house, $1 million house, and you don't have proper internet. So it has absolutely nothing to do with what you can afford. It's not a socioeconomic situation. It has everything to do with the fact that we need to improve our internet in the state of Wisconsin, and certainly in Dane County.
It's so interesting, Pam. You really have insight through your work on people's lives, how they lead their daily lives, don't you? I mean, it's really all of these things you have mentioned have to do with our real daily lives. And
Yep. Yeah. Being a realtor is really
on
interesting.
a
Oh, I'm
different,
sorry.
a different state.
I
Mhm,
think I
absolutely.
lost you
Well,
there.
Pam, yes, just for a second. Can you hear me
Yeah.
again? Good.
Yep, I can hear you
Uh,
again.
Great. Well, I wanted to ask you about the scarcity of homes for sale and the high cost. We all know the high cost of housing these days. So, what are the factors involved in this seller's market? And has COVID been responsible for in any way for this current market we're in?
Well, the one thing COVID has been probably responsible for with the current market is that um, we all realized at the same time whether our living spaces were going to work for us or not. That became very apparent pretty much all at the same time. But otherwise, no, I wouldn't say that COVID is responsible for our lack of inventory. Our lack of inventory is due to many years of a lot of things going on. Between 2008 and 2012, we had an overabundance of inventory, mainly due to the fact that because in '08, um, we a lot of people realized, okay, I've overextended myself due to the way that they were purchasing homes. They had 100% down. In some cases, 110%. They had no money down, and they even got money for closing costs. So they had no skin in the game, and that was a lending problem. And we have since then fixed that lending problem. So that's not an issue any longer. But what took place is somebody buys a home and they have no money down on it, and they're basically paying the mortgage, which could also be considered rent as far as they're concerned, because they could walk away from that house at any given time. And yeah, it's going to be a bump on their credit, but that was it. And so they weren't losing any money there. And so it was easier for a lot of people to actually walk away from their home than it was to need to pay for a mortgage that they couldn't afford, and due to because maybe they lost their jobs, to downsizing in companies and so forth. And um, so in 2008 and 2012, we had an awful lot of inventory on the market. And so our current builders just stopped. They just stopped building. And because they couldn't sell them anyway, because we had so many houses on the market. And many of our builders in Dane County had been building for many years. And they'd been through more than one downturn in the economy, and they didn't want to do it again. So they just said, I'm done. I'm walking away. I'm done building. And we really didn't fill that pipeline of builders. We still haven't filled that pipeline with builders. And so over between 2012 and now 2021, across the entire United States, this isn't just Wisconsin or Dane County or Fitchburg, it's across the entire country, that we have probably underbuilt 1 million homes a year since 2012. So we do not have enough housing, and we won't have enough housing for a long time when you base it off those numbers. And because we still don't have enough builders, and we also don't have enough product. We also don't have enough lots. So we need more development. We need more builders. We need to get our hands on product, and we need to keep building. And so Dane County has always been an expensive place to live. And probably what we would call affordable housing would be an apartment. And we all know our apartments aren't cheap. You know, you can get a 2-bedroom apartment from anywhere between $1,100 to $2,000 a month. Well, boy, that's not everybody can afford that. And so and we got apartments going up everywhere, but we truly do need more housing. And so it's going to take a while to get there. You know, we will get there eventually. It's not going to be a year or two. It's going to take a while. And so right now, at this moment, this snapshot in time is probably a good time for buyers to be buying, because the interest rates are still low. There's always fewer buyers in the fall than there are in the spring. And so if you want to get out there and get a nice house without paying 10% more than you should, this would be the time to do it. And so, you know, but what we're going through, we're going to continue to go through for a period of time. And so it's not going to fix itself soon with the housing.
Thank you for that detail that I think most people have not heard, Pam. Uh, I'm going to just switch us over to the commercial market, which I know is not necessarily where you spend your time, but maybe you could give us a little bit of information about it. We
Mhm.
know that, we've been the isolation and the social distancing certainly had those kind of requirements had an impact on businesses, and then businesses closing or changing their models. In order to survive. And I wonder if you can tell us about how commercial properties are faring from maybe what you see or hear from others in your field. And then is there less demand for office space because of the shift to many people working from home? So any comments you'd like to make on the commercial market?
So what we've seen with the office space is it's a little too soon to tell. We're seeing like Epic, all they wanted all their employees back. Promega, I don't think they have. And so everybody's a little different on that. And so we've still got a lot of people working from home, and companies figure out, can we do a hybrid? Can people work 3 days a week in the office and 2 days a week at home? Or I think what we've almost all of us have found in real estate, agents can work from home, and we've always, almost every realtor I know has a home office as well as an office, like my Fitchburg office. And just so that way, when I meet with clients, I meet with them in Fitchburg. But if I'm working at if I get an offer at 9 o'clock at night at home, I'm at home working. I'm still working, but I'm at home, and I'm not going to drive to Fitchburg. And so for realtors, we can do both very easily because we do everything really in the cloud, and other than the showings. But from a lot of offices and a lot of businesses, just working from home and doing Teams meetings, Zoom meetings, it's just not the same. You just don't get the collaboration that you really need or want. And so, even for ourselves, I have 70 agents that I work with in my offices. And we did team meetings immediately once COVID started. And so that way we stayed in touch. But we do a hybrid now. So we do in person. Whoever's comfortable with coming into the office can come in. We're masked up, but we can have a conversation. And everybody else is on the team meeting and we can see each other on the big screen. So it does work. It can work. And it's still, I think, in person is better, but yet if somebody's got an appointment at 10 o'clock and we have a meeting between 9 and 10, they can still hop on our Teams meeting and catch part of it, whereas they probably wouldn't have come to the office and then drive to their meeting. And that's what we're seeing a lot of other companies doing. Now, we're not really seeing people getting out of their leases necessarily. So large companies haven't ended their leases because they don't want to lose their office space yet, because they don't know necessarily what's going to happen with their company and how they're going to handle that. So we're not really in a bad position commercial wise at this point. I can say a lot of small commercial buildings are really selling quickly and selling well, because an awful lot of people throughout COVID realized, gosh, I don't really like my job. So maybe I should start a new job. And maybe I should start my own career. Maybe I should be self-employed. And so we are seeing a little bit more of a trend towards that than anything else. And so I think it's just, for COVID, we've all kind of had to think deep down, well, who am I and what do I want to be? And if I don't like what I'm doing, why am I doing it? There's a gazillion jobs out there. Go find one. And so they can make that change, and it's okay. A lot of people saved a lot of money. They didn't go to restaurants, they couldn't travel, they didn't go to the Princeton Club, to the gym, they didn't do those things. And so they had a lot of extra money. So now they're investing it. They might buy land, they might buy hunting land, they might buy a small office, they might buy a second home that they'll rent out. So we're financially in a good spot, in all honesty. And a lot of companies, they're paying their extra leases, but they're not buying lunches. They don't have any really stipends for travel. There's a lot of things they're saving on, so they can afford to do that. So it's working.
Yeah, interesting to hear the trade-offs that are being made and those new trends that are being coming forth now. Very interesting. Um, Pam, I'm going to ask you about maybe if there are any unique features to the Fitchburg market. You mentioned the lack of sometimes computer access in some spots in Fitchburg that you really would like to see that improve. Um, any other things that are maybe unique to the Fitchburg market, or are you seeing it in general, kind of reflecting what's going on in the rest of the state and maybe the nation?
I would have to say, well, the internet is certainly probably the big one right now that we see a lot. And then also, where is the development going to go? We realize no matter where it's going to be further away. Obviously, it's not going to be close to the downtown area, but I don't know that that's such a bad situation. But so you're going to be in Fitchburg, you're going to be in Verona, you're going to be in Middleton, a little bit further away. And do we have transportation to get places? Does the bus service need to be a little broader, so that way people aren't necessarily clogging up the roads? Do we need some different options there? And so I'd have to say travel is or transportation is probably of utmost importance. And grocery stores, maybe they need to be a little bit more localized. And do we need even more localized downtowns than what we used to have? People don't necessarily want to go to an interior mall. They're a little bit happier shopping outside. And so those might be trends that we might see all over, just because we're realizing we want to be outside. I mean, you take a look at trying to buy a bicycle right now, you pretty much can't do that. And or even skateboards, even anything that you want to do outside, buy a tent, it's hard to find. Get a campground, hard to find. So it's people are really getting outside and enjoying it. And I think that's probably a good move, in my opinion, that we are doing that. Um, Trying to think what other trends I'm starting to see. Obviously we're starting to share cars a little bit more because we might have to, because we can't get them. And so those are all things that we might just start doing more and more of. We might carpool with our family a little bit more, with mom and dad, instead of each of us having our own vehicle. So if that works for them. So those we might be taking a step back and rethinking, what do we really spend our money on and why? And so eating at home, having gardens, those are huge trends. What I am interested in seeing in the future is, if offices don't go back to like the downtown areas, will we make those downtown areas more housing? And not just apartments, but condos, where there's true ownership there. So what will we do with those office spaces and use those buildings effectively, a little bit more effectively than what we would be, if they don't become businesses? So, that's, and if they're old buildings, well, maybe they need to be garden spaces, or, and can gardens go on top of the rooftops? So there's a lot of things that I think we will start seeing as trends that are probably all good. And we're probably learning from COVID from that. I think it's very good.
Mhm. Yeah, it seems a major social upheaval in perhaps ways that we had never thought we would envision living have been
Right.
happening because of COVID driving that. Pam, thank you. That's just so many newer ways, different ways of looking at things that you've brought forth that are happening. I have one final question, and that's more of a personal one. Anything you'd like to share about being a real estate agent while this COVID has been going on? What's that been like for you?
It's really exciting, in all honesty. It's, at first, my first thought, because I work with 70 other agents and I manage them, is how am I going to keep my agents safe? How are we going to make sure they're okay? Because if they're not okay, they're not going to be able to help their clients, right? And so everybody needs to be safe in this environment. But we really, from probably the first week of COVID, we started using Microsoft Teams. And because everybody was a little fearful, they just really almost all the agents were on Microsoft Teams and listening and asking questions. And it was a constant pick up the phone, call my agents, make sure they're okay. Because some of them literally were, I think, in a onesie in the corner, just sucking their thumb, thinking, what's going to happen? And others were like, no, I'll beat this. We're good. We got this figured out. But you have all kinds of different personalities that you're working with and that's just my agents. There's all those other personalities of their clients, which are our buyers and our sellers. And we all needed to make sure everybody felt safe and felt good about the way we were going to tackle this and get them into a home and get their home sold. So sharing ideas, really cooperating with one another, even from firm to firm, call up start. What are you guys doing? This is what we're planning, and so these are things and we have plenty of offices. First Weber has plenty of offices in Madison that we could all cooperate. And we're the largest by far in the city. And so we could cooperate and make it happen very, very easily. But it doesn't hurt to reach out to other people too, and to be a big part of the Wisconsin Realtors Association to say, okay, what are we doing here? And we came up with COVID guidelines along with Wisconsin. We have our own attorney within First Weber, and he works with Wisconsin Realtors Association very closely. And so we could say, he would call me up, for example, and say, what are you guys doing in your office? And I would kind of give him the rundown, and then he would share that with the WRA. And we got guidelines in place for all of us. And it was pretty quick. I think we did a good job. And we still are, but it's more divided now. We've got people that are like, COVID isn't happening. We've got other people that realize this is a big deal. We still have to be safe. We have to have those masks on. And so every seller we sit down with, we discuss what's your comfort level. And we have to make it safe for you to come home to your house after showings. And I think we're doing a very, very good job of that. And so can it always be better? Yes, definitely. And this just is an ever-changing world. And as long as we keep adapting to this world, then we'll be fine. But we certainly have to accept the change and be okay with it, and accept the fact that, you know what, so it's not what it was in 2018. It's all right. Maybe we've learned that we need to be more respectful of other people since then. And that's not a bad thing.
No, not a bad thing at all. Pam, we want to just thank you so much for your time this afternoon. You've been so generous, and the insights we've gained about real estate, but also very much almost going into people's homes and seeing what it's been like, and the changes that are going on, what the future might look like, the trends that are happening. All of that is just so valuable to hear about. So we want to thank you very, very much for being our guest this afternoon. And I just want to just remind people that the interview with Pam, as well as our other interviews that we've had about COVID in Fitchburg, are going to be on our Fitchburg website, the Historical Society website, which is fitchburghistory.org. So people are always welcome to check in there for the interviews, but always so much more information about Fitchburg and its wonderful history. So thank you again, Pam, so much for your time this afternoon.
You're welcome, Catherine. Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.